Right now, more than 1 million apartments are under construction in the United States, the most since the 1970s. At one time, it meant more affordable rent for millions of Americans, but now it seems that's not the case. Developers have been rushing to finish projects that began during the pandemic, but many will be high-end luxury apartments going for more than $2,000 a month in cities with high job growth. The average rent grew substantially in the past 4 years. In June of 2019, it was $1,629 a month. And then by June of this year, it has grown to $2,029 a month. And that is a $400 jump. Now, economists do expect rent to come down slowly this year, but after prices skyrocketed 25% over just the past 4 years, it will only be a small step back toward what prices used to be. Bill Emmons joins us now live. He is an economist at the Federal Reserve Bank of St. Louis. Bill, thanks so much for your time today.
Pleasure to be here.
So, Bill, we're talking about this apartment boom that we haven't witnessed for 5 decades now. Explain to us why this won't help the affordable housing crisis in the country.
I think, first of all, the apartment building boom that we're seeing in recent years is really addressing a shortage of construction that goes back more than a decade. If you recall, the housing boom of the 90s and especially the 2000s was mostly centered on single family housing. And we saw a big increase in the home ownership rate. So that means a lot of individuals, households who otherwise would have been living in multifamily were moving into single family. Well, that meant that builders, of course, were responding to that and put those efforts into single family construction, neglecting multifamily. So I think what we're seeing now is some catch up for that really missing multifamily development that would have otherwise taken place back then. And I think also it's important to point out that there are some underlying issues with affordability, and we can get into those a little bit more, that this current building boom is not really going to address.
Well, actually, let's go ahead and talk about that because to your point, a
Right.
large number of these new apartments are actually considered luxury apartments. So why is it that there's construction of these high-priced apartments when people are still struggling to pay rent? I mean, what is the federal minimum wage right now? It's $7.25 an hour, and that hasn't gone up for the past 14 years.
Right. Right. Well, developers are capitalists and they respond to incentives to make profits, and the profits are at the high end. The margins, the same is true in lots of things, automobiles, fashion, whatever you want to think about. But housing is the same. The profits are higher in more expensive, higher end units, or same thing as for single family. So that's obviously not going to be the kind of unit that would be affordable to someone on low income. And so that's just always been the case. But I think it's also important probably to step back just a little bit and say, what kind of the economics of housing and why we seem to chronically have this discussion. This is not new to be talking about affordable housing problems. And as an economist, I would say you should look at both the demand side and the supply side. On the demand side, that is people who want to find housing, as you say, very low wages, low minimum wages, and even broader than that, the acceptability, the norms that we have in this country, and we have had for throughout our history of very low wages. So we have a substantial number of people who are earning poverty wages, and so it's just not going to be easy for those folks to find housing of any kind. Coupled with that, the expectation that people, I would say legitimately have to have adequate size and quality of housing units. And so, low incomes, and yet I'm not going to live in a very, very small, inadequate unit means that it's tough to find something. At the same time, on the supply side, just the basic economics of building that includes some fixed costs. I mean, you have to bring builders to a site. There are, legal requirements to file paperwork, you've got to get financing, all those sorts of things that are not scalable down to very, very small units. Certainly, that's most obvious with single family. You can't build a 300 square foot house profitably. Even then, when you're thinking about multifamily, those economies of scale and construction still are important, But here, really the key, and I think economists in the last decade at least have really zoomed in on this, is zoning restrictions. So you could imagine that builders might put up units, you call them micro apartments or tiny apartments that are very, very small, um, maybe good quality, but very small and very affordable. But that runs into zoning restrictions where often municipalities wouldn't allow that kind of density. Another approach would be manufactured housing. And again, there are lots and lots of communities, most communities, that zone out manufactured housing as undesirable. So you have this really two forces colliding. You have very low incomes and the expectation that you want decent housing, versus on the other side, the economics of building very, very low cost housing don't work for developers, and zoning makes it impossible even if that did work.
So, Bill, explain to us what we're seeing overall and how big of an issue this is, especially when it comes to inflation. When you're talking about the CPI, how much of inflation is housing? And how do we fix the problem? What is the solution in all of this? You named two different areas, but what is the overall
Right.
solution? Is it more legislation? Is it less regulation?
Well, economists most often will say the real solution is on the supply side to produce more housing, and that's true in the certainly in the middle and upper income range. And you do see, the construction that you're talking about that is happening. Affordable housing is a little different, because I said, because it's just not, the private sector is not going to provide that housing, especially when you've got these zoning restrictions. So the combination of what has been in the past inadequate supply across the entire market, but especially at the middle and lower ends, and cost increases that are pushing up construction costs, and the fact that housing is a very large part of the budget and all the inflation indexes. So your point is exactly right, that these chronic problems, and I say these are chronic, these are not new. Uh, Housing has been a pain point for many, many households for a long, long time, and it's also been chronically, when forces combine as they have right now, it has been a driver of inflation, and that's certainly what we're seeing right now.
Yeah, you're
So
right. It's been a
the
pain point for a
solution,
long time,
there's
and it
no
just doesn't
single
seem like it's going to
single
get any
solution.
better. I hate to cut you off, Bill, but we've got to get to a break. But thank you so much for your thoughts and your insight, as always. Bill Emmons with the Federal Reserve Bank of St.
Pleasure.
Louis. Thank you so much.